At 84 years old, Connie Smith has reached a point in life where reflection comes naturally and honesty feels well earned. Long revered as one of the purest voices in country music history, Smith has always preferred to let her songs do the talking. But now, with decades of experience behind her, she is finally speaking openly about one of the most important figures in her life and career, Bill Anderson. Born Connie Joan Romy on August 14, 1941, in Elkhart, Indiana, Smith rose from humble and often difficult beginnings to become one of the most celebrated female vocalists the genre has ever known. Her early life was shaped by economic hardship, emotional instability, and the kind of personal struggles that force resilience at a young age. Music became her refuge. As a teenager, she taught herself to play the guitar and found comfort in classic country, gospel hymns, and Appalachian ballads. Those influences would later define her unmistakable vocal style, pure, piercing, and emotionally direct. Even in her youth, Connie Smith possessed a voice that conveyed heartbreak, longing, and strength with remarkable clarity. It was a voice that didn't rely on embellishment or theatrics. It told the truth plainly, and people listened. Her life changed dramatically in the early 1960s after she moved to Ohio and joined a local band. During one performance, she was noticed by Bill Anderson, already one of country music's most respected songwriters and performers. Anderson immediately recognized something rare in Smith's voice, an emotional honesty that couldn't be manufactured. With Anderson's guidance, Smith secured a recording contract with RCA Victor, setting the stage for one of the most significant debuts in country music history. In 1964, she released her first single, Once a Day. The song became an instant sensation, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart and remaining there for an unprecedented 8 consecutive weeks, a record for a female country artist at the time. The success introduced Connie Smith as a major new star and established her signature sound, soaring vocals paired with traditional country instrumentation and deeply personal storytelling. What followed was a decade of extraordinary success. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Smith placed more than 70 songs on the country charts, including classics such as Then and Only Then, Ain't Had No Loving, I Never Once Stopped Loving You, and The Hurting's All Over. At a time when country music was gradually shifting toward smoother, pop-oriented production, Smith remained grounded in the genre's traditional values, honesty, restraint, and emotional depth. Her voice became her calling card. Fellow artists often described it as one of the finest instruments country music had ever produced. Legends such as Dolly Parton, Loretta Lynn, George Jones, and Merle Haggard openly admired her talent, many citing Connie Smith as a benchmark for vocal excellence. She had the rare ability to convey vulnerability without exaggeration, making her songs feel deeply personal and universally relatable. Yet behind the professional acclaim, Smith's personal life was far from easy. She struggled with anxiety, depression, and the immense pressures of fame, challenges she would later discuss with striking openness. In the late 1970s, at the height of her popularity, she made the deeply personal decision to step away from the industry to focus on her family and spiritual life. It was a rare and courageous choice at the time, and one that further defined her as an artist guided by conviction rather than commercial ambition. When she returned to music years later, it was on her own terms. Her recordings from the 1990s and 2000s were met with critical acclaim, showcasing a mature artist whose voice, though softened by time, retained its emotional power. Albums like Long Line of Heartaches and The Cry of the Heart reaffirmed her place as a living bridge between country music's past and present. By the early 2000s, Smith's legacy extended far beyond chart numbers. In 2002, she was ranked 9th on CMT's list of the greatest women of country music, an acknowledgement of her influence on the genre's very soul. Perhaps even more meaningful was praise from George Jones, who named her his all-time favorite female country singer in his memoir. Coming from one of Nashville's most respected voices, the compliment carried extraordinary weight. Smith continued to follow her spiritual calling, releasing the Christian album Love Never Fails in 2003, and inspiring a new generation of artists. Martina McBride later paid tribute by covering Once a Day, reaffirming Smith's enduring influence on modern country vocalists. In 2012, Connie Smith was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, a long overdue honor celebrated across the industry. She was praised not only for her success but for her unwavering dedication to the genre's emotional truth. Her personal life, marked by 4 marriages, reflected the same complexity and resilience found in her music. Each chapter brought lessons in love, faith, and perseverance. Her 4th marriage, to fellow country artist Marty Stewart in 1997, fulfilled a promise Stewart had made as a 12-year-old boy after seeing her perform. Their relationship, grounded in shared faith, became one of her life's greatest joys. Now, at 84, Smith looks back with clarity rather than nostalgia. When asked about Bill Anderson, she speaks not with sensationalism, but with gratitude. Bill came into my life when I didn't even understand what was happening to me, she reflects. I was just a girl who could sing, suddenly pulled into a world bigger than anything I imagined. Bill helped guide me through that. Anderson wrote several of her most defining songs and treated her with respect in an industry that often didn't. He listened, not just to my voice, but to who I was, she says. He believed sincerity mattered more than polish. Their bond, she emphasizes, was rooted in mentorship and mutual respect. He challenged me, but he never crossed boundaries. That meant everything. Looking back now, Smith says simply, Bill Anderson helped give me a voice, not just on records, but as a person. For that, I'll always be thankful. At 84, Connie Smith isn't rewriting history. She's finally telling it, quietly, honestly, and in her own unmistakable voice. As Connie Smith reflects on her life now, she is keenly aware that longevity in country music is not accidental. It is earned through discipline, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to truth. While many artists chase reinvention, Smith believes her endurance came from something simpler, staying honest, even when honesty came at a cost. I never thought of myself as a star, she has said more than once. I thought of myself as a singer who was lucky enough to be heard. That humility shaped every decision she made, especially during the years when fame pressed hardest against her personal values. During the height of her career, Smith faced an industry that often expected female artists to conform, to soften their sound, modernize their image, or prioritize commercial appeal over emotional authenticity. She resisted quietly but firmly. Her songs continue to speak from a woman's perspective rooted in vulnerability, strength, and moral clarity. She did not dramatize pain, she honored it. This approach sometimes limited her exposure in an era when country music increasingly flirted with pop crossover success. But it also preserved her credibility. Producers and musicians knew that when Connie Smith stepped into a studio, the performance would be real. There would be no shortcuts. Bill Anderson understood that instinctively. Long after their most active collaborations ended, Smith credits Anderson with teaching her one of the most valuable lessons of her career, that restraint could be more powerful than excess. Bill used to say, "Don't oversing it. Let the song breathe," she recalled. That stayed with me for the rest of my life. Their professional paths diverged over time, but the foundation he helped establish carried her through every phase of her career. When she stepped away from music in the late 1970s, many assumed she would fade quietly into nostalgia. Instead, her absence only deepened the respect surrounding her name. When Smith returned to recording years later, critics were struck by how little had been lost. Her voice bore the marks of time, but also the wisdom that only life experience can provide. There was a deeper stillness in her phrasing, a sense that she no longer needed to prove anything. She sang not to impress, but to connect. Younger artists took notice. Many cited her as an influence not just for her vocal ability, but for her courage in choosing substance over spectacle. In an industry often defined by trends, Connie Smith had become a constant. Her faith, which once pulled her away from the spotlight, now informed her music more openly. Gospel and spiritual themes appeared not as performances of belief, but as reflections of a life rebuilt from hardship. She never preached. She testified through tone alone. Behind the scenes, Smith also became known as a quiet encourager, particularly to women entering the business. She did not position herself as a mentor in any official sense, but her presence carried authority. When she spoke, people listened. She made you feel steady, one contemporary once said. Like if she could survive this business with her heart intact, maybe you could too. Her marriage to Marty Stewart brought a renewed sense of partnership into her life, both personal and professional. Stewart, deeply aware of her legacy, never attempted to reshape it. Instead, he protected it. Their collaboration was built on reverence rather than control, something Smith had not always experienced in earlier chapters of her life. Together, they embodied a rare balance: tradition without stagnation, faith without rigidity, love without illusion. As Smith aged, interviews became less frequent, but when she did speak, her words carried weight. She no longer filtered her experiences to satisfy expectations. She spoke plainly, with kindness but without revisionism. That honesty extended to how she remembered the men who shaped her career, including Bill Anderson. "There's no bitterness," she said quietly. "Just perspective." In an industry known for grudges and rivalries, her tone was striking. She acknowledged the difficulties, the misunderstandings, and the limits of any human relationship, but she refused to reduce history to headlines. "What matters to me now," she explained, "is whether someone helped you become who you were meant to be. Bill did that for me." Time has softened what once felt overwhelming. The pressures of early fame, the sacrifices of motherhood, the strain of constant touring, all of it now sits within a larger frame. Smith sees her life not as a series of peaks and valleys, but as a continuous unfolding. "I survived it," she said simply. "And I kept myself." That, perhaps, is her greatest achievement. As country music continues to evolve, Connie Smith's influence remains unmistakable. Her recordings still serve as reference points for vocal purity. Her career stands as evidence that success does not require self-erasure. And her reflections, offered now with clarity and grace, remind listeners that behind every legendary voice is a human being who learned, endured, and chose integrity again and again. At 84, Connie Smith is not looking backward with regret, nor forward with urgency. She is present. And in that presence, her story feels complete, not because it has ended, but because it has been told honestly. As Connie Smith enters the later years of her life, legacy is no longer something she chases. It is something she carries quietly, without performance or polish. Unlike many artists who attempt to control how history remembers them, Smith has chosen a different path. She trusts the work to speak, the songs to endure, and the truth to remain intact. She understands now that influence does not always announce itself. Sometimes it lives in the spaces between notes, in the restraint of a single phrase, or in the courage to remain authentic when compromise would have been easier. For generations of country singers, especially women, Connie Smith became proof that integrity could coexist with success. "You don't have to be loud to be strong," she once said. That philosophy guided her through decades in an industry that often rewarded excess. Smith's strength was quieter, but no less commanding. When she sang, audiences leaned in. There was no need to sell emotion. It was already there. In her later interviews, Smith speaks less about achievement and more about gratitude. She is thankful for the people who treated her with dignity, for the moments when she chose faith over fame, and for the ability to step away without losing herself. Fame, she believes, is fleeting. Character is not. Her reflections on Bill Anderson fit seamlessly into this worldview. She does not elevate him to myth, nor does she diminish his role. Instead, she places him exactly where he belongs, in the category of people who mattered. People who showed up. People who listened. People who understood that talent is fragile when not protected. That kind of guidance stays with you, she says. Even after the spotlight moves on. Smith's voice, now aged and weathered by time, still carries the emotional clarity that first captivated listeners more than 60 years ago. If anything, the years have stripped away what was unnecessary. What remains is essence. Truth. Stillness. She no longer measures her life by records sold or awards won. She measures it by relationships sustained, values upheld, and the quiet peace that comes from living in alignment with one's beliefs. It is a perspective earned only through experience, and through loss. In a music world increasingly defined by reinvention and speed, Connie Smith stands as a reminder that some legacies are built slowly, deliberately, and without compromise. Her influence is not loud, but it is permanent. At 84, She does not seek closure. She does not seek validation. She simply continues, rooted in faith, grounded in gratitude, and certain of who she is. And perhaps that is the final lesson of Connie Smith's story, that the truest voices are not the ones that shout to be remembered, but the ones that never stopped being honest.